See, I was worrying about which button to press, but the clue is in the next. So, yeah, last speaker, last day. Thank you, all the other speakers, for a brilliant session here this afternoon and for a brilliant day as well. I'm just going to speak about the experience of rolling our sleeves up at WWT to restore salt marshes. So we are WWT. Let me just move on. Our mission is really quite simple at WWT. It is to create and restore wetlands at scale. We know that so many species rely directly on the health of wetlands for feeding, for breeding, for migrating, and they can deliver amazing benefits to us humans too. From slowing floodwaters to sinking carbon, boosting our well-being and providing a home for nature, wetlands can do it all. There are weapons of mass creation, and it's our mission to restore wetlands and unlock their superpowers. And we do it through science, solutions, and with people. Today is going to be on intertidal habitats in the UK, a habitat I'm sure much loved, as I've heard, by this audience here. But often, in the public eye, they are undervalued and an underappreciated habitat. Recent research by WWT and others, as you've heard this afternoon, is revealing their value for biodiversity and for people more broadly. We are understanding more and more about salt marsh superpowers. On carbon, our research has shown that restored salt marshes, like Steart marshes here, can store carbon, let me get this right, can store carbon 40 times faster than temperate forests. More carbon and faster. And as the science and the salt marsh carbon code develops, we're learning that while the amount of creditable carbon may be less than the amount that we started talking about, these headline figures are still significant. Salt marshes also reduce the risk of coastal flooding, absorbing the energy of tidal surges and prolonging the life of realigned defences. And also, for an added bonus, wetlands like salt marsh can boost your mood in less than 10 minutes. This all makes that loss of salt marsh that I know we've been talking about here and in the past, that headline figure of 85% loss that we've discussed, even more concerning, and the importance of restoring intertidal habitats even more pressing. So, for me, what are the key questions we need to ask to restore this habitat? Well, it's where do we restore them, what are the barriers we face, and how do we pay for it? So, where will salt marsh go? Well, you'll not be surprised at WWT, we have built an interactive wetland map of potential around the whole of the UK, and there's a salt marsh layer to it. This was done by looking at all the areas that are most likely to be suitable for salt marsh, where the land is currently below the astronomical tide and could feasibly be subject to the ebb and flow of saline water through some form of intervention. This map identifies over 170,000 hectares of salt marsh creation potential in the UK. We're calling for just 20,000 of that as a starter. But identification of these areas is just the first step. Then there's the working how to pay for it, getting landowner support, gaining community support, and delivering at pace. The route to take these mapped opportunities to delivery is not easy. There are multiple physical, legislative, society, and policy challenges. And at WWT, we're solutions focused, so we're learning about these through rolling our sleeves up, getting ready, and trying to break through the problems. In 2014, we worked with the Environment Agency to create Steart marshes, and more recently, we're working on multiple sites in the Severn and with partners across the UK. And in December last year, we announced our intention to restore 148 hectares of salt marsh on the Orr Peninsula in the Forest of Dean, just opposite WWT's original site at Slimbridge. Our work on the Orr Peninsula followed extensive evaluation along the whole of the Severn Estuary, and more than 40 sites were assessed for feasibility. And as you may well imagine, as we're stepping through this process, multiple challenges have presented. as we work to restore wetlands. So I want to share with you some of those challenges. Well, that's obvious, isn't it? Having land available is pretty crucial. Ownership patterns are complex, and the willingness to sell or convert to intertidal habitats is intertwined in so many factors, including and especially including family heritage and history when you're talking about long farmers' sort of heritage looking after the land. Can farmers stay? Can they adapt? These are conversations we're having to have. Our tax system also gives no breaks for farmers to sell land for habitat restoration. And then there's the rising cost of land, even on land that's becoming less sustainable to farm. Now, as restorers of nature, we are also infrastructure developers and are therefore covered by the same regulations as developers. So this means we've got to think about other infrastructure. We're a small island. Our coastline is crowded with cables, pipes, outfalls, roads, buildings, properties, golf courses, footpaths. Where that infrastructure exists, the costs of change for creating intertidal habitat and the cost of consenting is even higher. Then there's the existing archaeology and nature conservation value that we have to and must take account of. Many of our low-lying coastal areas have a long history of human occupation. And being wet, that history is really well preserved. That deserves proper consideration. It can add time and money. It also adds new information for us as we do the research on these habitats that we're looking at. And existing conservation has to be considered, even if the reality on the ground might not match the designated feature. It's the designated status that decides the scale of compensation required. Creating that habitat compensation is really important. That all brings a level of investigation, data and modelling needed to secure permissions, and it can be challenging, and that's why we're working with government on planning reform to share our own lessons. Then there's the people, and I said at the start, WWT is about science, solutions and people. What we've been surprised about in our work on restoration is the lack of understanding amongst some communities, local authorities, MPs, about shoreline management plans. Many do not know what they really mean for coastal environments. And for those areas where the policy is anything but hold the line, hard conversations need to be had and had now. We need to also take time to understand community perceptions around risks of flooding, loss of access, loss of farmland. And we know early engagement in an open, collaborative way is key, as we did at Steert and as we're doing at Orr. Unfortunately, we are finding there's a lot of misinformation circulating about salt marshes. And as a result of some major project development, some high-profile projects, we're seeing that poor early community engagement is alienating communities. And as a consequence, we are seeing a backlash, not just against the project and the corporates, but to salt marsh habitats themselves. So I share these lessons to help make the business of restoring nature for us all better. How do we fund this? Well, it starts with the Salt Marsh Carbon Code, which could unlock up to £1 billion of private investment. We need the Salt Marsh Carbon Code fast-tracked, and we need salt marsh added to the Greenhouse Gas Registry. But as you've heard, the cost of securing land and capital, cost of construction, are such that carbon credits alone may not be sufficient. And in conditions where it's not possible to fund the site solely by selling captured carbon, there's potential to make the deficit up through other sources, on valuing biodiversity gains, on flood defence savings, on valuing society benefits. Those may be the decisive factor here, and we need to make bundling or stacking benefits possible as an investable proposition. So going forward, WWT will continue to learn and share our findings. We're driving forward multiple restoration projects with partners. We know salt marsh delivers carbon benefits faster than many habitats, and if we're going to meet that 2030 target, we need salt marshes now. We need to make salt marsh restoration at scale easier, fundable, and less costly. We need to make mainstream nature-based solutions. I want to finish by saying actually there's a need for a greater public dialogue about coastal change. shoreline management plans and the solutions salt marsh restoration can offer for that coastal change. Now, as the experts in this room, I'm asking you to get really good at explaining your story simply. We heard that this morning. We make it too complex and find ourselves just talking to each other. That will not create the momentum we need. WWT is taking this conversation to the public in a campaign starting next month. Please join us on that. And if you'd like to share any stories or any learning yourself, please get in touch here. Thank you.